All right, we're live. How's it going, Clifton?
Hey, Bill. It's really good to see you, man.
Likewise, dude. So for those that don't know, Clifton is CEO of TestFit IO, along with Ryan and the awesome team over there. Clifton, I remember the first time you and I had a chat. I was in Denver. We were subleasing a few desks from an architecture firm there. And I think you had reached out to me like on LinkedIn or something. And you're like, hey, I have this tool I want you to check out. And I remember like sitting in like the hallway because we didn't have like a proper conference room. And I remember sitting on this call and seeing TestFit like for the first time. And this is like, I think before you guys had funding or anything like that. And that was like kind of our first interaction. I don't know if you remember that. Do you remember that?
Dude, I remember like it was yesterday. Like this was maybe like early 2018. I had been just like ground pounding this thing, going into offices like in Atlanta and Boston and Dallas, Austin, Houston. Just like trying to like I would just like cold email people and be like, hey, will you please meet with me? Like, will you please just give me 30 minutes of your time? I'll give you a demo. Like, I made this thing. Like, this thing will be really great. And we got to like 10 or 15 customers like that way, like in the very early days. But I remember thinking to myself, like, man, this is like, I don't have a network. I don't know anybody professionally. I was 26 years old, really trying to sell software to people, like a new software product that nobody had ever seen before. And then one day, like I watched your Future of BIM is Not BIM presentation. Like I thought it was like quite good. And so that is to say, if you haven't watched Bill, like this must have been from like AU in like 2015 or something. Like
2016. Yeah, long time
it's like
ago.
it's like foundational lore presentation that all technologists in AEC need to watch.
No way.
But I'd watched that and I was like, well, this guy seems to know like what's up. I was like, there's no way he'd be interested in talking to me, like this weird like guy out of Texas that had this thing that drew like really massive buildings really quickly. And I think I DM'd you on LinkedIn, and like that started a really long relationship, which like frankly, like it's because of people like Bill that anything moves in the industry. Like he tweeted out something of ours, like it went viral. We got hundreds of demos. Like it was a game changer just having like Bill around. So yeah, I vividly remember Bill the first time we talked.
Yeah, I remember that. And then since then, like, dude, we've had a lot of fun times having beers in Denver, and we've even ridden on electric scooters together and shared like a bunk bed Airbnb in Atlanta. Some pretty fun stuff. I was trying to find on Twitter. I think we have an image somewhere of that, like our Airbnb. And
the like fitting like I almost weigh like I'm 280 pounds, and Bill's like this. He's like a banana, like a small, slender, kind of bald kind of guy. And so we're on this electric scooter together, and it must have been Clive Jordan was there. He's like, what the hell are y'all doing? Like, we're like, we're part of the Lime Bike revolution, man. Like we're liming to the conference. Like you're not liming.
Totally. Yeah. We shared that with Clive too. That was a good time. I remember that. And Clive's tool is pretty cool. What he's doing as well, like the whole LOD planner. So shout out to Clive and what they're doing with the LOD planner. So we all get to hang out in Atlanta and ride electric scooters and drink beer and do some presentations and demos. So that was good.
Well, this is pre-COVID. This is in a world that was full of joy and sunshine.
Totally.
Now it's run away from the virus.
Yeah. Well, you guys are in Texas. Like, how's Texas going? I know Claire on our team's in Austin, and Texas is kind of took it a little differently. You guys are all opened up now, right? 100%. Are people like doing meetings and demos and all of that stuff in Texas?
I think a lot of people never stopped going to the office to begin with. Like there's a huge chunk of people that never left their office in the first place. So that might be like 40% of office workers. The other big slice of people, like kind of like working from home, I think. But I mean, I had been working from home since 2017. So like I'd liked it, you know, I had liked working from home since I was doing homework, like in third grade as a kid. Like it's where you're used to getting your work done. So I don't know, like it hasn't been a huge disruption, I don't think, to me, but to other people that really need to have the accountability of people around them. And like, that's quite a bit of a disruption. But in Texas in general, like masks, I think we went out to dinner this past weekend and I didn't see anybody wearing a mask anywhere in sight. Like pandemic is over, I guess, in Texas. And then in other states, they're pretending like it's like going to kill everybody tomorrow. So I don't like, I refer to experts, on what they would do, but it feels like we're at the end of it. Is what my thought is, Bill. I mean, how about you?
Yeah, that's good. No, I'm excited. I think we're getting out of the woods a bit more. I had my first meeting this week. I got to meet with Kiewit Construction, which was cool, and got to go to their office. And that was like the first time in a while, like to do in-person meetings. Most everything's been Zoom and Teams. So it was cool to actually like get out of the office a bit and go meet with people again. And also met with another guy that's starting his own fire protection company. We got dinner with him and our lunch with him and one of our team members, Holly, which was awesome. So it's nice to finally get out and meet with people again. So that's pretty good.
Yeah. You can't look like seeing somebody in person is excellent.
Yeah.
They're a real tactile person, and working in tech, like most of our customers are not in Texas. Like we're based out of Dallas, but like since 2019, the vast majority of our revenue has been from outside Texas. It's very hard to like maintain relationships with people that are in like Minneapolis or Washington, DC, or like they're just far away. So, part of the joy, I think, of going to the post-COVID world is like actually being able to go fly places, meet with people. And you actually get to understand quite a bit more about their markets. Like TestFit's a configurator company. We build configurators. And every jurisdiction is like different in how they approach like compliance to buildings. And you'll have different typologies in different places. So like in Minneapolis, for example, I'm going to keep picking at Minneapolis because I've got a really great user there. And he's got this building typology that's like you bury all of the parking and then you just put a building on top of the parking, and it saves, like, it's an OpEx problem. Like it saves them a lot of money because they insulate their parking garage because they want to heat their garage during the winter. Like something that you would never build in Texas because it's quite a bit more inefficient, but it solves a very different problem. And being able to fly places and meet people and talk in person about those issues that they have in their planning problems is a really good thing to be doing. And we haven't been able to do it for like a year. So invariably we're like extracting feedback out of customers, like in every call, like what should we build more? Like, what do you want to see next? And whereas it happens a lot more organically when you're able to fly around.
Totally agree. I love it. And speaking of which, like, I want to get to TestFit. We're going to do a demo. We're going to keep the conversation going. But we just don't want this to just be Clifton and I. You guys feel free. I already see some people blowing up the chat. Big shout out to Mark, Matt McMullen there in Denver. A lot of familiar names and faces. So if you guys can keep the chat going, we want to know where you guys are at. And let's do a little poll: work from home versus not work from home versus hybrid. What's your guys' opinion on that? I want to see what everyone's thoughts are on there. I personally, like, we were talking about having a mandatory work from home day for our team, because it's like when we were in the office, it's like you can get pulled and distracted so much. And so now we're all working from home. I kind of miss the office again now. What are your thoughts, Clifton, on like the whole work from home versus not work from home? We're talking about meeting in person with like interviews and meeting, doing networking, but what about for you and Ryan and the team at TestFit? Do you guys have an office? Are you guys 100% remote? What did COVID do to that? Where are you guys at with the work from home versus not work from home conversation?
Yeah. So in early 2020, like right before the pandemic started, we closed a seed round. We raised $2 million to keep doing what we had been doing. And to keep doing what we've been doing, but to scale it quite a bit faster and to add some engineers and, really build a company. Like, it was just me and Ryan, like, throwing together some code and selling it to people. Now it's, let's build a company. So when you build a company, your thoughts are, okay, well, there's a group of people, there's a common goal, and there's typically a common work environment, a physical place that we go to. So we had really liked this co-working space in Dallas called Common Desk, which is in Deep Ellum. It feels a bit like Austin. It's like the Austin part of Dallas, which me and Ryan went to UT. We love Austin. We think we like the culture there a little bit, the sort of grungy vibe that Deep Ellum has. And we felt like programmers and salespeople and marketers, like they all would want to work in that, area. So we got this really great office. It was like Ryan and I upgraded from basically sitting underneath the staircase behind the water cooler, in a office that could fit 2.5 people comfortably. And we have this picture of my sister Caroline, who works for us. She's sitting in there with me and Ryan, and there's literally no other space. There's my dog is sitting in there, like staring out the door, like, get me the hell out of here. So it was very, like, I would say, like, intimate, and like intimacy breeds accountability, breeds innovation, breeds quite a bit of things. And that's something that we're missing, I think, in this, Slack world that we're in right now. But we were going to build this whole team here in Dallas, and pandemic happened. And like, I think it was actually kind of a blessing in disguise, because we've been able to hire people based off of like their skill set, as opposed to their skill set, but also where they're located. And like, for example, like Alexine Gordon-Stewart, she's our marketing director. We got her shortly after, well, I guess right before BIMTrack got acquired by Newforma. And like, she might be the best hire that any AEC startup could have made at all. Like, if you had a leaderboard of the best hires made by startups in like since pandemic, like, we've got to be like right on top of that leaderboard. But it's because we're able to hire people that are the best at what they do, no matter where they are at. And all, the friction is compliance and getting set up with, different states if you hire within the US. And there's software out there that can help you stay compliant. Like, we've got an employee in Massachusetts, and we pay $48 a month to the unemployment fund in Massachusetts. Like, these are all little annoying things you have to handle when you're in a small business, but software helps us do it.
That's right.
So like, to answer your question, like, we are fully virtual, but we would like to have an office at some point.
That's good. Yeah, I like it. I don't know if you remember our office you came in and saw when we were working in the back of a brewery in Boulder, Colorado. And that little office you mentioned working where, like, I think technically from an occupancy, I think it was supposed to be one person in that office. And I think we were managed to fit like 5 EvolveLAB team members with like stacking shelves and monitors. And it got pretty hot. There was like no air conditioning at all in the back of that brewery. So five human beings with computers running and no air conditioning. That was hot. And so, yeah.
Not just like Max, like 5 BIM boxes running all at the same time.
That's right. Speaking of which, Buck Davis, we see you on there watching on the live stream. Shout out to Buck and BIMbox and all the awesome things they're doing. We own a few of the BIM boxes.
Actually, I gotta say, Buck has really good customer support. Like, I had an issue with my new Slim that he said I should get, and I was like trying to plug it into the VR headset, and like, there's not very many laptops. Like, shout out to BIMbox for this. There's not very many laptops that can run a VR headset in the same way that like this BIMbox can. And we just needed like a very specific metal connector to get to like this one very specific port. And he's like, oh yeah. Like, I told this to you the day you bought it. I was like, look, if you are trying to do anything weird with graphics, you need to use this one cable and this one port. And of course, like, didn't read the email and didn't pay attention. And then I'm like Twitter messaging him like, hey, how does this thing work? And he's like, I sent you the email about this.
That's great. Yeah, shout out to Buck. He also was mentioning he came and joined us. I got tacos with Buck at our office. And then also shout out to Adam in the chat there. We were subleasing from 359 Design there in Denver as well. So a lot of popular faces and names. Love all you guys and good to see everyone there. Shout out to Ryan too. He's listening and commenting. So love it. So Clifton, segueing into TestFit. Before TestFit, what were you doing? And like, why did you and Ryan start TestFit? Like, what's your guys's? Yeah, I'm gonna play the Simon Sinek. Like, what's your why? Like, why did you guys start TestFit? What problem were you guys trying to solve? How did you guys come up with the idea? Why did you team up with Ryan? Give us kind of like the backstory, the genesis of pre-TestFit, and maybe how you and Ryan knew each other and why you guys started doing what you guys are doing.
Yeah. So for anybody listening, like having a co-founder is incredibly important, I think, when you go out and start a company on your own, especially if you're in your 20s and don't have any idea what the hell you're doing. Having a co-founder is incredibly important. So Ryan, like I've actually met Ryan fall of 2010. I just rushed fraternity and he rushed the same one, and we were on a party barge out in the middle of Lake Travis. And I remember the party barge and Lake Travis because it was a hyper drought. Like there was no water in Lake Travis at all, which is like supposed to be the largest lake, you know, in Texas. And it was like a pond. And so we're like going around in circles at the very bottom of the lake where they just have a little bit of water. And I just sort of sidled up to Ryan there, like, hey man, what do you want to do in college? Or, you know, I don't even know what questions you sort of ask that early on in college, but he had an interest in computer science, in software engineering, and I had an interest in architecture, and we kind of started talking about our favorite games, and like
video games or board games or
video games.
Oh yeah,
definitely video games. Well, we played our fair share of Catan over the years, but we decided to build a tower defense game together out of Flash. Like this is, you know, we grew up on like the penny arcade games or something where it's all Flash, and so we thought Flash was really cool. And then Apple ended up killing Flash like the next year. We didn't make too much progress on the game, but we had a lot of fun with each other. And so we decided to move in. We're roommates. And when we were roommates, there was 10 of us in a 6-bedroom house. So that means that there were 2 people that had their own room. Everybody else was doubled up. And we decided, well, we were the guys that were in our solo rooms, and we decided, hey, like let's have a room for our gaming room that we play the computer games in, and we'll have another room for where we do our sleeping. It was like a complete like waste of rent, honestly. Like we could have had 2 more people live in the house, but we had like everybody was jealous because we had space and they didn't. So I know our relationship was just founded on that, like really kind of fun joint life experiences. And fast forward several years, you know, I got married. He was one of my groomsmen, and then I was going into the real world and had started working in real estate development and felt like I could solve a lot of the problems myself in Excel, and I did. And but then I hit a wall, which is I was incapable of conceptualizing how to solve a deeper problem. And like a problem like a really good computational designer or software engineer or somebody that's deadly good at math would be able to solve. And I was none of those things. So I just called him one day. I was like, hey, like I would like to solve this very complicated math problem. And he said, okay, well, what's the complexity? He's like, well, we have these units that are all these X dimensions wide, and then we have corridors that are Y dimension wide. We have to figure out how to fit as many units onto this corridor as possible, but we also have to hit this unit mix and solve for the least amount of open space, between units. And it took me probably a year to really understand the problem. And it took Ryan 15 seconds to build a solution for the problem. And that was sort of the thing that really hit me. It was like, wow, like imagine if every architect out there had a guy that could solve their problems for them, in 15 seconds. Like,
right.
If I just sort of was like, all right, this is completely asymmetrical. Like, this is something that is innovative, simply because like he took a problem that would take 4 hours to solve and did it in 10 seconds. So I didn't think at that point in time that like this would turn into a startup. I thought to myself, holy crap, like software engineers are going to destroy like all soft services industries from now until the end of time if you give them enough time. Like, and then you start thinking like, oh, well, that means that every industry will essentially become software at some point. So that was my thoughts in 2015. We had this little terminal application that did all the math, and I was excited about it. But the thing that really got TestFit going was Ryan got laid off from his mobile games studio he was working for. Which mobile games, like, it's a bust. It's a bang or bust kind of ecosystem. You build a really fun game, but Apple doesn't put it at the top, of the list or something, like you fail. Like your company is screwed. You're totally beholden to whatever the big app stores, how you do on those big app stores. Mm-hmm. And there's a bit of marketing and stuff you can do, but it's a pretty rough way to make a living. And he's like, hey, I want to work on this while I look for other jobs. And I was like, okay, well, I guess we'll get like 3 weeks out of this. And he just never found another job. Like, he just stopped looking. And there was a bit of excitement for me. I'm like, hey, like this could be a startup. Like we could become a company, and like we could have titles and business cards and a website and all the things that you think are important for a business when you're outside of the business. Those are the things that we were like excited about doing, or I was excited about doing. And then, so we won, I think it was the summer or Christmas time, in 2016. Yeah, I think it was 2016. And at the end of Christmas, Ryan had spent, I guess, most of his Christmas break, like programming. I took a break like a normal person during Christmas break. And he sent me a MSI, which is an installer. I installed it, and it was a graphical interface. Like you could draw for the first time the kind of things that we were trying to solve. And I honestly, like, that's when it hit me. I was like, okay, like we could actually build a pretty incredible product. I don't know how many architects or how many developers or how many brokers, like, I don't know who the market is. I don't know anything, but I know that we're building a lot of apartments, and I know that there's some automation that should be happening on a lot of it. And so like we fell backwards into building a small business, which we thought it was a startup at the time, but really it was a small business. It was something that very cost conscious, very, like, we saved up for several months in order to be able to afford to fly to Atlanta to then go present to several, firms. We saved for several months to do the same thing in Boston. Those were my first 2 trips, Atlanta and Boston. And just, you just work your butt off for a year and a half and have an idea and tenacity to demand people to pay for it. And you'll find takers. I mean, if you have something that provides real value. And I think I remember writing the first paycheck to myself maybe in 2018. It was like $2,000. It was like, to Clifton Harness, great work yourself. It's like $2,000. It's like, you get paid less than minimum wage or something. And But we earned it like ourselves. And, you know, like you go to startup milestones are really cool. Like when you're inside a company, because like you achieve the milestone, you go out and you get a couple beers. And well, in our case, we spent maybe all $250 of our first license, you know, fee. I think we spent all one bar within 4 hours or something. But you get around the next day and you reload and you're like, all right, what's the next milestone? You don't have time to really sort of sit around and like, that's the difference between a small business and a startup is like, startup is like grow. Small business is like successful, but with a sustained growth rate at, you know, a lower number, but it's positive cash flow. It's been de-risked completely. Startups are all risk, all growth. So yeah, I mean, that was, we felt like time to convert this small business into a startup and gasoline on the fire. We hired some amazing people and have increased our offering from like 3 or 4 configurators to 14 over the course of less than a year and a half with you know, a team that's 10 people. But we're not yet at the point where we're going to hire like a massive sales force and just start calling people. We're not at the growth phase yet. We're almost there.
It's good. That's great backstory. So then the problem that you guys are solving, and I liked one of the things I was catching when you were talking about your conversation with Ryan, like it needs to do this configuration. It needs to maximize these variables. It needs to minimize these variables. So is TestFit like a multi-objective optimization tool? And maybe this is a good segue. I don't know if you're able to share your screen, but maybe could you start to kind of talk about what problems TestFit's solving and what it's exactly doing and how it's helping?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I can see some questions now. That's cool. I will answer said questions presently, Craig and Dustin. So can you see my screen, Bill?
Yep.
All right. This is I think this is Denver. Yeah, I think I typed in Denver. So typology meaning types of buildings, and then morphology meaning the shapes of buildings. So by type, TestFit really is focused on housing. And by morphology, there's lots of different forms that our software takes. So here I clicked the define from parcels button, and then I'm going to set it to podium fill, and then I'm going to click on this piece of land, and it's going to generate a building. So that, I mean, it's like, you know, 5 years of effort into one click. But essentially what we did was we filled the whole site with parking, and then we put a stick building on top of it, and we generated 1,000 units. And this is the wrong kind of building for this piece of land. It's too dense. So this is the wrong morphology, the wrong form to use. Might be the right typology, might be the right multifamily typology, but it's the wrong form to use. So I'm going to flip it into a lower density housing, like a townhouse deal. This feels a little bit more correct, a little bit better in terms of the density and the surrounding areas, but it still might be too dense. And so we build configurators that generate this, but we also build the sort of parametrics in it that give users the ability to adjust the density. So for example, I'm going to make it to a duplex max. So it's going to give me just duplexes. And then I'm going to ask for it to have a bit of a buffer between them. So row gap size, I'm going to increase this a little bit. And you can see like it's trying to achieve highest and best use or highest density with every solve. So Bill, I think you asked a question like, is it a goals and constraints environment? It is, but it's not an evolutionary solver that it throws 15 trillion, combinations into a solver, and then you as the user don't do anything. So I don't let me dive into. I'll do a different one. We released this yesterday. It's garden apartments. It's a little bit more nuanced than the townhouse solver. So let's see. I did a big density, and then I did townhouse density. So this is the third configurator I'm showing on this presentation is the garden apartment one. And you generate the site plan, but this is where TestFit gets really, really exciting, is with the manual tools. So this is what it automatically generated. And you can see it left out like a lot of the site up here at the top. It's not that intelligent. Like, it didn't see that it was I-70 and decided to put the buildings further away. It just didn't solve this top half of the site. It's not as intelligent, as an architect would be. So what I can do is I can go into manual tools and I can draw in a road, and then I can snap, or I can drop in just a couple of buildings, and then I can click the manual mode button again. And I've increased my density. I've increased my parking yield. The deal is overall better, or the deal is in better financial performance, because you still have to spend all this money on this land to get it. This might be an okay scheme. We'll save it as a scheme. But really what I want to do is I want to put the parking on the other side of the of these buildings, because I want the parking to be up against the highway. So I go to manual mode, go to the road, right click to remove it, go to the buildings. I'll move this guy down. I kind of want them to look past each other. We'll see if this change makes any sense here in a minute. Get me a road, manual, and it seems like a little bit better of a change. But then again, you're going to have some clearance problems with, these are probably too close to each other. But this is co-creation. TestFit generated the initial site plan, and we are going to edit it. We're going to make small changes to it and get to a faster result more quickly.
That's great. And I remember, like, in the early days when I was talking to you about the tool, I remember there was a big push towards the software creating solutions. And I remember asking you the question because it was iterating and interrogating multiple options. And I remember it would present you with an option. Like you were saying, it's not an evolutionary problem solver. It just kind of shows you this solution. And I remember asking how come that's the best solution? And I remember your question back to me is why wouldn't it be the best solution? It considered that. And I know, I was noticing down at the bottom, you have this schema that you're talking about. And when you had the program where it would iterate multiple options, you would start to be able to have that parallel graph chart to see those various schemas and what they were solving for before. Mm-hmm. And I'm noticing too, now that you're using words like co-authoring and manual, can you talk a little bit about the evolution from where TestFit was, and now maybe the architect did have more control over those schemas, or this quote manual mode? What changed, and where was that pivot, and why did you guys go this direction? Because I think this is really critical to software and people thinking software is replacing architects or something, when it's really not. It's a tool that's helping an architect solve a problem and create that solution. So can you talk through that manual mode and quote co-authoring?
Yeah. So it's initially we thought what people wanted was what Autodesk had been always marketing, was this ability just to generate a ton of things and then filter to a solution that you actually wanted. What we learned in our customer feedback was that people wanted actually the opposite. They wanted a really good scheme to start from. Because that's all the friction is, getting to a place where you have all of the pieces that you need so that you can understand the building that you're designing. So customer feedback was, we don't want trillions of options. We would like 2. And of the 2, we would like to then edit those options to make them better. And so we have a parallel coordinate graph in TestFit, but it's so that you can compare manually created schemes. I can cycle through all of these schemes in here, and they've been manually created, and hopefully they've been manually edited too. A computer is only as intelligent as math. The computer cannot have intuition. Well, some people think computers can have intuition. Neural nets kind of have intuition, but the intuition and the nuance to design is, I think, for right now, firmly in the hands of the designer. I do think that every industry, soft skills industry, will be attacked by software at some point. Like every industry in 50 years from now will essentially just be software. But for right now, like co-creation, putting the human in charge of the algorithms seems like the right approach. And because of how we're doing with sales and how we're doing with growth and how we're doing with people's perception of TestFit, like that, I think we're headed in the right direction. Full-on generative design is not possible. You cannot put enough constraints onto a piece of land and expect it to get a better solution than what a human would be able to do. Because the amount of effort and constraints that you would need to put in is more than the amount of time that, I don't know, 50 or 60 of these real buildings would be able to be designed. Like, it's just astronomical, the amount of constraints that you have to plug in. But TestFit does generate at least one solution that solves for all of the user's constraints, and that's what we present to the user. And so that's maybe what I'm referring to is like it's a perfect scheme because it solves for all of the criteria that the user has given it.
Nice. That's great. And then as it relates to the types of architecture it can do, what are the building types that it's able to execute? You mentioned townhouses. Is it mostly residential? What are the building typologies? Someone's asking in the chat that it can support.
Sure. So here we can do it right now. So we've got let's see here, site. I'm actually gonna just reset. I'm gonna make it a simple box. I'm gonna go like 350 by 450. And we have snapping now. It's a new feature in the latest update. You can snap. Okay, so we shipped initially with a wrap. This is a typology that's mainly geared towards Texas, lower. Well, we've seen a lot of them in other states too, but basically, like it's got a parking garage that's lined on edges, and you can also define the location of the garage, so you can pick it up and move it, and then you can say, I want my courtyards to be not oppressive. So this is the wrap. This is the first thing we shipped with. This is where we got 15 customers off of in the very beginning. So that was the wrap, and then the unparked is like the wrap, except that it doesn't have a parking structure at all. So our customers in other countries typically want to use this one as a starting point because they have less parking in other countries. Imagine that. And then there's podium fill, which is the one that I think I started with. It's got 2 levels of parking, and then it's got stick on top. You can do multiple. You can change the height of that, and then if it's a super constrained site like this, then it starts to turn into more of a tower, more of what you would do in like a downtown. So that's podium, wrap, and then I got this list somewhere. I forced our team to go down memory lane with me the other day on all the different things that we've released. So we've got hotel. Here, I'll pull this in a little bit, but I need to change it to hotel standard. So what this does is it drops in modules as opposed to flexible units. So these are all on a module. We have a feature called depth clumping. It's trying to clump all of the units of similar depth together. But what a lot of the architects do is they'll use these unit depth clumping as a way of articulating facade. So you can simply right click and kind of change some of the pieces on the facade, get a different bump out. So this is the sort of hotel feature with the mods. It's a pretty popular tool for hotel people, which is a new market for us. We have a couple of hotel users. So that's hotel. Let's see, parked. we've just done like gone crazy. Lower density, so you can do duplex, you can do row homes, single family layouts, and all of these are flexible, so you can kind of manipulate the objects that are being placed. Core-based buildings. This was our minimum viable product, and it solves for getting the right size of lavatories and water closets, and our stairs are dynamically sizing based off of the floor load. So if you add like a ton of fixed seating, we end up with giant staircases, and we had to get 2 bathrooms instead of 1 bathroom. So this isn't fully there yet, but it's how we're thinking about modeling IBC elements in more freeform buildings. But it's an okay minimum viable product for a core and shell generator. And then garden buildings, the last kind of big push this year was to get Garden out, which has its own building editor, within it. So if you had felt particularly strongly about studio units or something, we could basically convert this whole plan into studios in 1 beds or studios in 2 beds. There's building D, and then building D gets placed, on the site. So those are the vast majority of the configurators. We're at 14. I think our closest competitor maybe have like 3 or 4. So site topography is not taken into account, Dustin, but we have a feature called voids that our customers have been using for that purpose. So let's say this side of the site is really high, meaning that it's like above the elevation of the other sides of the site. We can change its type to a void, and then in 3D we've removed some of that building. So if you have a big hill or something you're trying to avoid, you can use voids. I would like to build like a cut and fill algorithm, but there's just no good topo data out there. So like we could build it, but it would be useless to you.
Good comment. Yeah, Christopher also had a similar question is on the topography as Dustin. So thanks for answering that, Clifton. Craig was also asking, what does good architecture mean to you? And how does TestFit help with that?
Yeah. My definition of architecture, well, I don't know, like good architecture. I'm not going to add a qualifier in there. I'm just going to say my definition of architecture is the meaningful creation of space. And so, like, if you were to take a TestFit generated building and send it to permitting or something, or site plan approval to the city, it's not great architecture. Like, this is not architecture yet. There's another layer of information that needs to happen. Like, it either needs to be that you as the architect have decided that you're going to create units that have, maybe an inset balcony that's to an edge, and, that's going to be one of your design moves. Your facade has been meaningfully, crafted to think through, like, how does this edge address the road? Turn the colors off. So, like, it would be a shame, I think, if architects were to just print this out and take it as gospel as to the thing that, needs to be permitted. But I don't know, like, I don't think people ask Autodesk what good architecture means. So maybe don't ask TestFit what good architecture means.
Yeah, I guess too, architecture in many regards is subjective. What might be good to one architect might not be good to another. And it seems like a lot of what you do with TestFit, Clifton, is objective analysis, like trying to optimize rentable square feet or floor area ratio or other things like that. It objectively solves certain problems, but aesthetically, the subjective part, would you say you leave that up to an architect to start solving? Or where do you draw the line on subjective versus objective is maybe the question.
I think if there was an objective way if there is an objective way to subjectively measure whether or not a building is a good building, we would be doing it. But unfortunately, the arbiters of whether or not a building is good is the architects. Like, those are the people that have the ultimate decision power, and it's also it's very subjective. Like, is a building good or bad? I don't know, but does it help solve the housing problem? Was it profitable enough that the developer would want to work in that market again? Was the construction on time, and was it as effective as it could be in bringing the product to market? Was the construction good? So like there's a lot to consider in terms of like, was it a good building or good architecture? And I mean, TestFit, all it is like the very beginning of the process. Like, this is not the final building. This is by far from the final building. But what TestFit does is it gets everybody that's working on this building onto a common sheet of paper about 40 times faster than drawing it by hand. So, I mean, if you are an architecture firm doing housing, I mean, we basically have built out your whole pre-development suite of tools, for you to use. And we have like pretty amazing architects using TestFit right now.
Good comment. And Chris, he mentions developers pay architects to design low-cost, highly pragmatic buildings. So, quote, good architecture may be going away in some areas, which stings a little bit. But I also think about that. I mean, I think that's true. But it's also like the goals for a development project might be different than the goals for, say, a stadium or a museum. And I remember when I worked in architecture, we had 2 studios, and one of them primarily worked on healthcare, and then and that was the studio I worked in. And then the other one worked on like stadiums and really high profile museum projects. And the running joke was like the healthcare studio made the money while the other studio won the awards, which I don't think is necessarily a good thing or a good thing to say, but there was some truth to it. It's like, well, what are your goals for each studio and project typology? And what are you trying to solve for? What is the objective? Is it to design the most efficient building layout on a site for the least amount of money? Or is your goal, like if you're designing a museum, I guarantee you it's not the most efficient use of said space to display artwork. But there's a reason that you design it that way, and there's a goal and an objective to it. And so Jing was asking, do you know and I'm curious your opinion on that, Clifton. And as a follow-up, Jing is asking, do you know if people in other spaces are trying to solve some of those other project typologies, i.e. stadiums, airports, train stations, etc.?
So there's a great architect. His name is Leon Creer. He's a classical guy. He is not he's not like a less is more, like he's just a very different kind of thinker. And he's got a great book. I'm stumbling on the name of the book right now, but I'll find it and I'll message it to you. But it sets out like architecture in a very specific way. Like it says like, is this a civic building versus is it all else kinds of buildings? And like a civic building is something like an airport or a train station or a stadium, things that are highly visible. A lot of humans go to, but more importantly, humans of different stripes, like different kinds of humans go there. Whereas if you're designing like a very, expensive single family neighborhood, luxury single family neighborhood, like there's only really one kind of person that's going to be ended up going there. And Creer was saying that like if you have any kind of civic space, that kind of architecture should be loud. It should be noticed. It should be something that the society is happy to pour money into because it's about something greater than just the individual. And a lot of real estate developers fall into the category of ego, of like, I want my building to be the sexiest, most beautiful building in the whole city, and it's an apartment building. So like it's just the way that I would approach the market if I were a commodity apartment architect would very much be the way that Creer does, where if it's I think you use the term fabric building. Like apartments are the fabric buildings of cities. And fabric buildings are commodity buildings. Fabric buildings are things that shouldn't be the most impressive building, in the city. So, I think I'm kind of explaining my perspective that apartment, like what we do at TestFit's commodity. Like we do not do stadiums. We're not going to do an airport generator. We're not going to do a train station generator. Like those are things that are highly asynchronous and don't happen all the time. Whereas there's more apartments being built today than there has been in the history of the United States. So.
Yeah. And are you noticing that, like, does TestFit help with the housing shortage, and can it help do other kind of project typologies like micro housing? Does it support that kind? And is it trying to help solve that problem of finding housing in America at the rate we're going?
I think so. In a way, it enables our customers to get their feasibility studies done. Here's like a micro unit. It's just a super tiny building with a giant void space in it. Let me remove that. If you have a affordable housing project that you're trying to do with micro units, certainly we can help you solve that problem. But whether or not you're doing micro units depends upon what market you're in, and what market you're in, then defines what kind of buildings you do. So that is to say, like, sure, like we help some firms that are doing micro units, but it's not like our core focus. Our core focus is all of housing. How can we make all of housing more efficient? And during COVID, we saw a massive increase in low density requests. Like our core customer was a high density user, somebody in a city that was really trying to figure out what to do with 2 acres and turned it into like 300 units. And that has since changed. Our modal user is doing low density, is doing stuff where there's a lower land basis, meaning that the cost of land is cheaper, and therefore the ability to develop a project is much higher. And all the people that own land in the middle of cities right now, they're not selling it because its value has gone down. So they're going to wait for the market to come back. So I don't know. That's just, you sort of ride the market because you're a company and you serve these customers. But we didn't set out initially to build a garden apartment configurator, a lower density configurator. Our ethos is really new urbanist, but it doesn't mean we can't build the best garden apartment generator on the planet. We already, we did it. We might have the only garden apartment generator on the planet.
Good comment.
So then I can say we're the best because we're the only one.
That's right. Not much competition in that space. I think it's interesting too. Can you talk? I think you guys do a really good job of listening to customers. Can you talk a bit about, like, was the garden apartment function, was that a direct response to listening to your customer base? Was the manual mode a direct response to customer base? Would you guys have done that if it was not for influence from outside architecture firms and developers?
Yeah. So we've had over, I don't think I want to say the number. I won't say the number live. We've had a lot of architecture firms and development shops pay us and use our software. It used to be in the early days that people would say, if you build this is startup advice too. If you build this, we'll pay for it. Never do that because you'll build it and then they'll never pay for it. So really, we've started to qualify customer feedback to people that are currently paying us, and the initial roadmap has been exhausted. So everything that we're doing now is customer feedback. There's a little bit of leadership that we bring to the table in terms of, like, here's what here's how we should go about doing this. But really, it's our customers that are driving the roadmap. we're going to have some updates this summer, near the end of the summer, that's going to be quite good, I think, for the industry. We'll be able to address the whole industry as opposed to just housing, which I'm pretty excited about. But our ethos for sure is like, let's eliminate the whole need for people to count parking spaces, to do these sort of boring, how do I call it boring? Like, it's not really boring. It's just like, you have a professional degree, like you shouldn't be spending your time counting things. Software really should be able to do that for you, or hire an intern that can count things, right? But that's just it's either between a software, hey, we helped Matt solve affordable project in Aurora to drive unit count as high as possible within the bulk plan. Nice. Yeah, so like the feedback from customers was, we want, the ability to like have a setback at height feature. And so we spent quite a bit of time, building this thing where you could have, it'll give you some options that are terrible. But this is like 3D massing, constraint solver. This is all the stuff it did automatically. It's pretty bad, the stuff it did automatically. So what I'll do is I'll just go into manual mode, grab an edge of the building, go back to 3D, and there's my, how I'm doing this 45-degree offset or something. So
is that helpful, like in New York? Like, I know in New York, there's a specific study that they have to do for those setbacks as it relates to towers and buildings at over a certain height level.
You're gonna have to ask Envelope City. I mean, there are some. That's another startup, right? They're probably more than a startup now. I think they're like an established company, but there are buildings out there that are a result of zoning, where something like TestFit is not going to be helpful at all. Like, you would have to read through all of the zoning to get the building that you're allowed to do. Whereas TestFit sort of assumes that you either already have the zoning, or it's like not New York City. So where it's more just like, hey, keep your FAR below 2 and we'll be happy. So I'd say like 90% of the US is pretty unconstrained. But when we get into markets where it's form-based code or more complicated zoning, that's why we've had to build these crazy envelope at height tools and give people the ability to like, there's a feature in here called, what the heck is it? Setback slope step. This thing's crazy. It's like, how close do you allow your building to get to the plane? And so like, you can kind of see, we kind of visualize it on this panel on the left, but
that's great.
How aggressive do you want to be with how close you get to this plane?
Yeah, take some risks there.
Yeah.
Another question is, Dustin was wondering, with the new features, you were talking about like responding to people that are asking for things. He's asking, does LOI, for those that don't speak legalese, that's letter of intent, with feature requests, make it more real? Like if someone had a letter of intent, or you're only responding to customers that are paying? You mentioned that earlier, so I'm assuming that would be your answer, but.
I mean, like a copy of TestFit's $500 a month. Annually $5,100, I think, might be what our annual contract is now. Like, if your firm is unwilling to pay for that, then you're going to be unwilling to sign an LOI and be unwilling to be, a customer that's going to be a long-term startup. What I'm saying, like, there's some firms that are willing to take this risk with startups like TestFit, and that's what we're looking for. Like, right from the get-go, is like, are they willing to pay like just $500? And if your firm is not, then the way that we look at it is like, okay, well, that was the first test, is like, can you pay $500? And if you're not willing to, then then I got to spend a whole lot of money getting that firm to pay $500. Like, think how many, I got people that do demos, people that do support, people that are on the chat bubble all day, ready, willing, and able to support people. like it costs money for us to support people, especially when they're on a free trial, right? We're not earning anything. So I don't know, like Dustin, maybe if it's like AECOM or some giant company that, I could probably sue for lack of following through on LOI. But then again, like the amount of money you'd want to sue for is, probably $250,000 or something like really meaningful. So no, like I don't know, LOI, just be a good customer. Give us good feedback. We'll build stuff for you. Like that's really it's a relational thing.
That's
which
right.
is kind of weird. Like it's not all transactional; it's relational.
100%. I love that. That's what I've learned too with EvolveLAB is like everything is relationship. Even businesses that buy from business is like the relationship. Same thing with Buck and other people that we buy stuff from. It's relationship. I wanted to share this this is I did find this. So for the conversation at the beginning, this is Clifton mine, our Airbnb in Atlanta. So I successfully fit up here on the top bunk. You were down here, and I think Clive was somewhere in this room or on the couch or something. So
yeah, he was on that couch. Actually, I think he left to go get a hotel because he's like, I'm not sleeping in here with y'all.
It's too weird. Too weird. So found that for those that were curious. So that's good. Cool, man. Clifton, thanks so much for talking about TestFit, showing us what it does, talking philosophically, architecture. Any last words of wisdom? We're at time, so I want to give you the last word. Any final thoughts or comments you would share with the group? Words of wisdom, etc.
Yeah. Look, my relationship with Bill is really great, and the reason why it's great is because Bill picked up the phone when I was, kind of desperate, and was willing to take a chance on me. Like everything you do in your career, like now that I'm on the other side and like people are asking me for advice, it's like just be willing to talk to people. Cause I think I was able to get Bill some work, like a pretty good contract or something. Like these relationships are really great because it's relational. Maybe we should just talk about how important relationships are. Like you can only do so much just with your skill set, and relying on other people's help is perfectly fine. Like there are other people out there because they're really good at what they do. You can't do it all on your own. And maybe the biggest learning thing that I've done in the last 4 months, as we've tried to scale this company, is like just being able to hand stuff off to people and trust that other people can do things. And when you do that and they start doing things that you would have never imagined, is when you start to realize, okay, people are incredibly good at what they do. Yeah. So that's my advice. Like just reach out. Like it's not hard. We're not like wizards in some tower that you have to like knock down the door to come talk to you. Like literally you can send me a Twitter message and I'll respond.
I love it. From the great philosopher, Clifton Harness, it's all about relationships. Thanks, man. Appreciate that.
Yeah, man.
All right, guys, we're at time. Thanks so much for joining the live stream. We're trying to do these every Thursday. Clifton, thanks so much for being a guest, man, and giving us some of your time, showing off TestFit. Big shout out to Ryan and the team over there for all the awesome work you guys are doing. We'll catch you guys on the flip side. And thank you so much. Thanks, Clifton.
Cheers, guys.